Hello and welcome to the Wednesday, February 26th edition of the Image Builder Office Hours, a subproject of Sig Cluster Lifecycle. Just a reminder that this meeting is recorded and will be posted up to YouTube later, and it also abides by the Kubernetes community guidelines. So in general, please be excellent to one another. With that said, please go ahead and add yourself to the attending list if you are attending live. I've linked that in the Zoom chat. And if you have any topics that you'd like to bring up, please add them to the agenda as well. All right. So our first agenda item is an announcement. Was that you, Travis?
It was, yeah. And also, I probably feel like I was just taking some notes and I probably spelled Justin's last name wrong. Um, but yeah, just following on from 2 weeks ago, I said I was going to tag the repo. I threatened to do that in the past. This time I really did it. So there is a V010 tag now. And that just allows people and documentation to point to a stable repo, especially for consumers of the Cluster API builder. And one of the other big reasons I wanted to get that in is if we ever make further progress with Moshe's work to create a CLI, that's going to change the experience dramatically. So I wanted to at least have something that we could branch from or maintain until we were ready to switch to that. So that has been done finally.
Cool.
Beyond that, yeah, I didn't have any much else to add to the agenda except, yeah, I wasn't sure, what Justin's typing right now. He had a bit of a proposal around doing some consolidation, but since he shared it with us a couple of us privately first, I wasn't sure if he was wanting to bring it up here yet or not.
Yeah, I just did a Docker thing to you, Travis, and you, Moshe, but I can, if there are no like horrendous objections, like I can share it more widely. I'll like share it. Do we have a mailing list? I don't know.
Not outside
Generally
of
just use the Sig Cluster Lifecycle mailing list.
Okay.
Yeah. And I apologize, Justin, I have not gotten the chance to review it yet, but it's on my stack for this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, it's not it's just like, I think we mentioned it in some other meeting this week. The idea is just to like investigate. When I was looking at the unification, like I saw that Docker did seem to be the common, or Docker containers or container images, I should say, seem to be the common ground that all of us could work with. In that Packer can write to Docker and config ADM, we could probably easily like write a Docker backend or just run config ADM in Docker. And the logic that there was, such as there is in kubedeploy, would probably be better expressed in a Docker build, a Docker file. And it is possible to convert a Docker container image to a VM image, at least on, well, I think everywhere. I think Tim Sinclair brought up the minor snafu of Windows, which made me cry a little. But yes, that was sort of the idea that is in that doc. So if you have time to look at it, that's great. Otherwise, I will also just share it with. I'll just share it with the group and put a link in the meeting minutes.
Yeah, I definitely have no objections to that.
I could probably get some more eyes from the cluster API perspective, but it will probably not be this week just because we're nearing the V1 Alpha 3 release.
Yeah, it wasn't urgent. It was more just like I was sort of playing around with things and trying to understand like how we would ever bring these different streams together.
So I've been relooking at that CLI, and I think we can kind of break it down so that we actually make everybody happy. So if we separate out basically the idea of executing some stuff, creating an image, and actually the framework for doing so into different phases and let them feed into each other, I think we can support most combinations. So for example, what I'm calling an engine, so you would support, let's say, Packer, Docker, and QEMU as an engine. So those are kind of the three ways that we're thinking about, that you can start with something and do some stuff and then produce something. We then build in an abstraction for image handling and conversion, so that you can go from Docker to QEMU to AWS, or QEMU to GCE, so that you can kind of mix and match them. So I can start with a Docker and land it on AWS, or start with a Docker and land it on an OVA or vSphere. Or I can start with a Packer image. Packer is a bit of the funny one, because I don't know what the export options are from the different clouds. I think some of them you can export the images. I don't know. I haven't done too much research, but for that we can always say restrict the input and output image formats. If you're using Packer, then you kind of are limited to ISO and OVA, or AMI and AMI, and Azure, and kind of mix and interchange the formats. And then in the middle, we plug in basically three ways of executing stuff, which is Shell, Ansible, and config. And we plug it in, and then we provide the bits for doing the Kubernetes stuff out of the box, and then let people mix and match what they want to do. So take a Docker image, do the Kubernetes bits and whatever that is, add on a shell script, an Ansible script, and a config admin script, or whatever combination before or afterwards, and then emit something and do something with it. So that's kind of the vision that I'm seeing now, that will make everybody happy, because I don't think we'll succeed in one approach. So it's just what are your guys' thoughts on that?
My first thought is it's a pretty lofty goal. I like the sound of it, but yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of crossing of the streams, I guess. That yeah, I think will be hard, but.
So if you break it down into its individual components, and you treat it like a Unix program for each phase, so like on the Docker side of things, converting from Docker to a disk image is actually not such a difficult thing. So we implement that, and then going from a disk image to AWS is not such a difficult thing, or disk image to OVA, or disk image to vSphere. So each one of these individual things is solved somewhere. We just need to bring it all together and make it make the workflow extendable, so that you can plug and play.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
I think I agree with that, and I think like building up the small, like as you say, Unix philosophy, like the individual tools, and I don't know what we'll do about the things that aren't possible. Like you can't directly take or I don't know. It's certainly much harder to take an EBS or an AMI and get it into like download it locally, but it is possible. So I don't know about. I'm sure there'll be something that's not actually possible, but I like the idea of building these up, and I would imagine that most people will be covered by the commands that are possible.
Yep. So I'm prepared to do quite a bit of legwork. I'll get my team involved as well a little bit. I just need to kind of know what's the capacity on everybody else's side, which I know is always like negative, but what capacity could be found is my question.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when it comes to anything to do with the CLI, it's something I've expressed interest in, and I have brought it up with kind of my priority deciders in the past, and I don't think it's something that would happen in the next few weeks, but it is within scope, or like there's a vision of like, yes, the resources need to go to that. I know one of the first things that I'd want to see is a little bit more of a document, not a CAP, but like something that kind of outlines how those pieces go together. And there was a previous version of that Tim St. Clair and some others worked on. I'll try to dig that up if nobody remembers it. But this sounds very much the same thing, dividing it up into stages and being able to pick what the next processor in that stage is. But yeah, I mean, it's, as far as me as a developer on it, the answer is like yes, but not quite yet.
So maybe what we can do is that you can work on the encapsulating the Packer plus Ansible into a Docker image that makes it a little bit more consumable. So specifically like dependencies and things like that. So if we make the way of executing Packer using a Docker image, and then all we're doing is providing, as part of the release process, we could release a Docker image with the bundled Ansible scripts. That might actually help us quite a bit, and help you as well.
Oh, sure. And I think you had given me some links once before to some existing work along those lines you had done. And if I remember right, the context was, look at this, it was hard, and this is a hard problem.
Well, actually, the solution was pretty easy: is stick everything in Docker.
Okay.
But yeah, the problem is hard, yeah.
If that's true, I will try and find those again, or if you do have them handy, would you be willing to drop links to those in the doc?
Yep, I'll do that for you.
Thank you.
And in terms of what I can work on, I am happy to work on the path that I know and I'm going to use, which I think is a good combination, rather than the path I don't know and will not use. And like for me, that's like building this. I have to get a Buster. I think it's Buster. I have to get the next version of Debian, that image going on AWS and for COPS users. And so I think like, and I can structure the logic that is currently in kubedeploy in more reusable ways. So like creating an image, I guess, well, the Docker build to create an image, which I think is not terribly complicated. Then like Docker to AMI or Docker to disk image, and disk image to AMI, and publishing the AMI and replicating the AMI, which is currently locked in kubedeploy, but there's absolutely no reason for that to be the case. So I can like break those down as like little commandlets or whatever we want to call them, and like if we have some place to put them in. But I can imagine us building up like a toolbox of these things in Cobra, not just like test Cobra.
Yep.
Right, exactly. But like there are lots of these little ones, and I can certainly work on those. I don't know whether it's 4 or 5, and it might be that the number changes as I go to build it, but I can certainly work on that.
Yep, sounds good.
From my end, I probably don't have any development resources that I can contribute, but I'm more than happy to provide feedback on docs and especially test things out as we start getting to the POC stage as well. Because I'm still currently building all the images, especially for the AWS provider. So it's relatively easy for me to spin something up, test it, and verify that it works as we expect.
Cool.
Jason, what are you using to build those images? Packer or?
Yeah, we're using Packer. So the Packer scripts that are currently in repo.
Cool.
Okay, so sounds like we kind of have a good path forward. I'm going to start by just submitting the kind of API structure as a PR, and I'll take the doc that Travis was talking about and update that a little bit towards more of the multiple matrix option, and then we can go from there.
That sounds great.
Cool.
Do we have any other topics for today? All right.
Cool.
Thank you all very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Wednesday.